Test 1, 2. All right, good. So let's try again. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Scherer. Most of you probably know me by my nickname, Der Euromark, in IRC or in GitHub. I am a core contributor to CakePHP for maybe about 2 years now. I have been working with CakePHP for probably 6 years, maybe 5. And yeah, most of my applications and work are around CakePHP, as I am quite a fan of rapid development and I want to get stuff done quickly. And yeah, that's why I chose CakePHP back in the days with 1.2, 1.3, where I started. My talk today is going to be about AJAX and CakePHP. This is a topic that's usually not covered very much, but it's used quite a lot in the internet, of course, as it's quite convenient for a lot of cases. And so I want to go into detail here how to set it up with CakePHP in a dry way. I mean, obviously you code probably like hundreds of lines, but we want to leverage the framework and what it offers to minimize the coding we need. So the agenda is pretty much first, what is AJAX, and then when to use it or when not to use it. We go into some basics, and I'll explain a few examples regarding get and post. And then I have some more examples around the use of AJAX. We can actually look at the code then, and you also have access to the GitHub repo where you can take a closer look then afterwards or whenever you want to. Yeah, and finally, maybe a few tips. Good. So first, AJAX. It's a long name if you actually spell it out. Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And it has been around quite a long time. It basically, I don't want to go into details because you can look all that up. Basically, you request a page once, and then you can, on top, just pull and push data with AJAX. And that's quite convenient because you can exchange data without changing the position where you are in the document. So if you like scroll down and you want to disable something, you maybe, with normal post links or whatever, have to click, it redirects, and then afterwards you're like probably at the beginning of your page again, after that modify whatever you do there, your post. So yeah, it's quite convenient that you can just do that with AJAX and you can stay right at the position you are in the document. So that's a very, very interesting use case. Inline editing is pretty much the same thing. You don't have to open another form and then go back to where you actually were in the text, but you can just probably edit the date or the content of whatever text you're looking at right inside this HTML page. You've probably seen a lot of real-time validation. Like when you type something, it already checks if the password is strong enough on the registration form, if the email is valid, if you might have an invalid URL you put somewhere in. All that stuff can also be done with AJAX for forms, for example. You do get a native look and feel. It doesn't redirect the page itself, as I mentioned earlier. So if you load elements, like just in time, or you update them, you can probably see that on Facebook a lot of times, where the timestamps of like posted for 2 minutes ago is updated every few seconds, and it almost looks like it's just real and native on this computer or this browser, but it actually just fetches a lot of data all the time in the background. But you can also do prefetching if you have like lots of stuff you want to show. Maybe if you scroll down, you can probably kind of also get that during the visit of the website, so you don't have to wait then when you actually require it. And data lookups, for example, you have a search form and you type in like the first 2 letters and you will have autocomplete and whatever thing. Yeah, there are many other use cases where you can use them. but it's also important to mention the facts where you should be careful about using it. We all know that with search engine optimization, there might be problems with incorrect usage of AJAX. For me, AJAX should mainly always be something you put on top of your normal stuff. So if someone didn't have JavaScript enabled, or that's not that important, but if like a search engine goes to your website, it should be able to crawl the website and to access all the main points. But if someone actually has JavaScript enabled, he can probably then use the enhanced AJAX loading to get the native experience. And yeah, that's usually how I like to do it, combining those two and making it available for both Java and non-JavaScript ways. Browser history. So if you request a lot of things with AJAX and move around, you might not be able to actually go back with the back button as you used to be. So that might also be a little bit awkward sometimes. There are solutions out there that you can use. I think Facebook, a few websites, maybe a GitHub as well, do that. So you can have the back button again, but you need to be aware of that and yeah, check it out. Bookmarking. If you don't change the URL via AJAX reloading, you might not be able to share the content of the website or bookmark it easily. So if you want to show someone else, hey, look at that cool information, he might not see the same result as you just did, which is kind of awkward. I want to like have that page exactly as I seen it, and at some point want to see it again or show other people. So it depends on what content it is, but if it's a coupon or whatever, and you want to like distribute it to other people and say, hey, I just bought that, then it would be bad for your website if it just showed the default screen or whatever. So you should be aware of bookmarking aspects regarding content that is AJAXified. Network issues. Sometimes it feels awkward if like the slow connection or you clicked somewhere else in the meantime. If they just, the AJAX requests are so slow that you're somewhere else already, or there's a mix-up, and you know you have to take care of that stuff as well at some point. Yeah, you can't really poll with AJAX. I mean, you probably could, but it's not very efficient. So if you like want to make an messaging alert or something, yeah, usually you probably do with AJAX like ping every 10 seconds and request if there's a new message coming in from some user, but that's not very efficient, and it's also not too efficient to keep the request open like for unlimited time and just waiting that the server responds again. For that you probably should like look into different solutions. And same origin policy. You can't really use AJAX across domains very easily. You will have to work around that as well. This is mainly for protection, so you can't, by accident, yeah, get some dangerous stuff on your website, which is then JavaScript, and with JavaScript you are pretty much unlimited in what you can do, XSS and whatever. Good. Let's move on. One important thing is that AJAX itself has or follows the same principles as HTTP basically does. So if you delete something, if you edit something, you shouldn't use get for it, because get is mainly for retrieving data only. As soon as you modify the database or do something like that, you should use post or put. And that you can also check in your controllers and verify that the correct protocol is being used. Then extensions. We all know the controller action without any extension. That's the default for just text HTML. And you can request AJAX via exactly that as well. And you would also get plain text HTML snippets or whatever you need, and you can just inject them in your DOM and in your HTML. But most of the time, me anyway, I want to use JSON, or at least some extension protocol. And that's mainly because you can do more with it. You don't have to like hijack the headers to send additional information, but you can just nest the information inside the JSON object and pass more data with this way. And usually it would be then from the type application JSON. Yeah, and that's an important thing for me. The URL you're requesting should match the format. So if I request the first, intuitively I would expect HTML. If I request the second URL, I would natively, from like the experience I usually have with extensions, I would expect a JSON response. So yeah, if you use the first one with JSON, it kind of feels awkward. I recommend sticking to the actual extension you want to request. It's also clearer for other team members, or if you look at the coder later, okay, sure, this is JSON. Anyway, no, I want to go here. So, a few basic things we have to do to set up Cake is basically in Cake 2.4, 2.5, it changed to parse extensions to actually start parsing, and then set extensions to whitelist extensions we want to set. Earlier in previous versions, and I think it probably still works, you can just whitelist all of them by default, but that's usually not very practical. So here's a few examples now. Our most important one, JSON, is in here. But of course, you can also use other things with extensions. We just, for that example now, just need JSON in there. And also one very nice thing is the request handler in this case for 2.x, as we can just add this one to the app controller components, and it will help us auto-detect AJAX requests and serve the right content in the right type. So if we then request this URL again, action JSON, and it's an invalid action because we typed it wrong or whatever, we also get a response already in AJAX, which is nice, because the error message itself should also be in the same presentation format as the actual response we are trying to get. So if we request that, it would just be 404 message then as a JSON response. Whereas in the first example, it would be an HTML response for a 404 as we all know it. Then we can check for AJAX in controllers if we need to like add additional logic or change the layout. Even though it's done automatically, we might want to change it to something else. We can also say allow method AJAX. So if you try to exit it without AJAX, you probably would get a 403 not allowed. As in this case, we specifically want that action only to work with AJAX. I usually don't do that one. I do like post and get, but you can add on top add this one as well. The check itself is available. So a basic action could look like this. This is one of the earlier versions I had, I mean, years ago probably. So the auto-render false is probably only necessary if we actually change the return JSON to this response body. In 2.x, you shouldn't return strings anymore, but you should use this return body and then put just the JSON encode in there as a string. And then we need the auto-render actually again, because otherwise it would try to find a view for that one, but we don't want to, as we just pass JSON data here back to the rendering. Yeah, so this is a very basic example. We can request with controller name favorites.json and would just get the JSON encoded string. A cleaner version, though, would be to let the view class take care of formatting. So I've seen a lot of people use it like return JSON. If we look at this example, we can see that we're just setting the data to the view, and we set serialized data, and we do have a JSON view, which by default via the request handler is responsible now for doing all the formatting. So if we pass serialized data, it knows, oh, okay, we want the data array to be serialized and to be returned as content. So by doing this, we shorten our code, clean it, and let the view handle the formatting. We don't have to do that in the controller, since the view class already tries to look for it anyway. So that's a cleaner way to get it done. A basic view could be something like this. You can have a button or a link. You can also have links. Careful with links though, you might have to set prevent default, e.prevent default or something, to not actually trigger the link as well. Just watch out with that one. But for just a basic button, you can use a target element or something where you want to inject whatever you're requesting. And I usually like to add the URL to the actual HTML content somewhere and not in the JavaScript. Because if I want to take the JavaScript and put it on a specific extra file and to avoid loading the JavaScript all again because I want to cache it in the browser, I don't want to have the URLs in there. So I can use the data URL element, for example, and I do have it inside here in the button. And if we have the JavaScript here, we can say target URL is data URL. So if you click on the button, we get the URL from that element. And we can take all this element, this JavaScript code, and put it into a file and let the browser cache it and don't need to reload it all over again all the time. It can also be compressed and served with all the rest of the JavaScript if you want to. So I like to keep it quite non-specific at that point. So the target URL we have, we do a basic AJAX here, type get in this case, because we just want to retrieve a counter or how many favorites or whatever. This one is usually not necessary, the before send, as I think it adds that automatically, but I've seen some browsers not taking care of that too properly, so we can just add it to be safe. And the success function basically returns an object, and you can check on the object. In our case, we have, if you remember, an error and a content key. We can just take a look again. Here, content and error. And if for some reason we can't request that favorite counter, we can respond an error code or something, and we can load it here and say, okay, well, there's an error now. Let's alert, or let's put a flash message or something on the screen why we can't do that request. But if everything works out, we can have the target element just add the content to its DOM HTML. And there's always an error function of some sort, which is triggered if there's a non-200 OK response. So if the connection is bad, or at some point you logged out, whatever worked, whatever happened, you probably run into the error here. So I've set this up actually as a very easy demo app, and it's just on GitHub as well, which I can show you later. So yeah, I think this is it. And in this case, if I click me, and by the way, note that I added the Firebug console. The Firebug console is very, very useful for debugging your AJAX, like right in time in your browser. So if I click on this button, I can see that the result is the timestamp, which I just added in the controller for convenience now. And we can see that it made a GET request to that URL we were expecting, and it got a 200 OK response. And we can look at the actual headers. Application JSON is what we expected anyway. And the content and error keys are returned as we expected. So, and those two we can leverage, and you can add as many keys as you want to. And that should probably explain why JSON might be a little bit more convenient to use than just plain HTML responses, as plain HTML is just a basic string and you can't really add additional information unless you use headers or whatever. So, yeah, this is pretty much it. And also here's an example, don't click me. And I just simulate an error happening in the controller or model. And by adding like error equals 1, I have a little snippet in the controller checking for if the error is passed. And if so, we simulate an error. And yeah, so in this case, it runs into the something blew up. It's the, whoops, where's the slides? It's like this here, if res error not equals empty string. So we just ran into that one because we passed some error string. Yeah, I mean, that's truly, really basic, and of course you have to enhance it for like a real application. But I think it should get a feeling of how you can return different content and react to certain things happening. So, okay, so this is the basic application. Let's move on. Testing. If you test that with a controller test case, and you have an allow only, method allow AJAX in there, you probably always get an error, as you will have to simulate the AJAX by adding the env as written here, requested with XML HTTP request. And with this, it sees it as AJAX again, and the test then works. Using post is quite similar. You can add a data array to what we just had in our views. I can open that up pretty quick. The post example would look like this. So we have the same code, but we have a form data which grabs from two inputs, 1 and 2 in this case, and they are basically just up here. Form input 1, form input 2, and they will end up in form data, and we pass the form data with our AJAX request, and in our controller we can then simply use this request data 1 and data 2, and we'll have the information available in the controller to work with it and to respond with an appropriate message. Yeah. I think that should also be set up somewhere as a test. Yes. So in this case, we can add 2 and 3 to our forms. And let's do just a basic add sum calculation. And we calculate. And let's check what we actually post. So the post here, you can see it's 1, 2, 2, 3. So the both keys and its values are posted properly. And it seems the result is 5, which is correct. And it's passed in the sum key. So if we look at the source code for post, we can see that in the success function, we just use the res.sum and inject it into our target div, or span element. I think it's a div, yeah, genau. So also quite basic. And just to show how posting data from forms or anywhere on that website can also be used to give information back to the controller and to do something with it. So 20 plus 3, yay. Okay. And with testing the controller, it's also the same thing. You just have to add env again. And in our case, we might also want to simulate the data we are passing in. So we should add the array with 1 and 2 filled out, and they will end up in the data array then, this request data. And of course, in this case, we need the method post, because we are probably doing something on the database, saving it, storing it. If we're doing a post, which we are doing in this example, we should also adjust the test case accordingly. I didn't show that earlier, but here you can see. In this case, we do a post, as we might save the result in the database or lock it away or whatever. Okay. Yeah, a few more examples regarding toggle, autocomplete, change dropdowns, and pagination. Yeah, let's look at them pretty quick. The simple JSON response we just did, basically, so that we can skip. A toggle is always a nice feature. I told about that earlier. I said something about being like staying on the website wherever we are, and we can just trigger. Let's add Firebug really quick. Okay, so we click on the no, and bam, it's a yes. We just toggled with the status 1, and if you click on it again, it's 0 again. And note, in the background, in this example, I save it to the session and simulate an actual database saved with it. So if I reload the page, it's now active. If I click on it, it's inactive. And if I reload the page, it still is inactive, as it's stored in the session or in the database. And also, you can see that in this case, I also use post. I don't want to use get for modifying the database. I just return a basic string of the icon, and I can do that as many times as I want to. The only difference in this case is I render the view of it, and then I render the JSON response. So basically, there are two renderers going on in that controller, which looks a little bit weird looking at it. So if we go to the sandbox controller AJAX examples, you can just look at it pretty quick. This one is the simple example, which we just covered earlier, with serialize in it. This is a toggle, yeah. So if it's AJAX, we get the query status. What do we pass? What we want to do? Is it 0? Is it 1? And I write it to the session to persist it. And here you can see that I pass it to the view and use render to render the toggle element, yes, no icon, which can be more complicated, like a huge blog post or whatever, for preview, for example. And this result I set back to the view, and I need to use auto-render like true again, equals true, in order to make serialize and the JSON view work again. Now you could also manually render again a second time, but in this case we just pass what we just rendered into the JSON response and get the same JSON object in the view as we previously did. So that's just a little bit of weird workaround here. And to clean that one up, I actually did something else with the chained dropdowns here. I'll show you the example first. Chained dropdowns, where are you? Ah, here. So if I have a country and I want to select the country province, the state, so to speak, for a certain country on registration, I can go to Österreich, well, that's not German, but anyway, Austria. And you see that I get a get response. I post get, and I get a response from the JSON country provinces AJAX JSON, and I can use that to populate the country province. So now they are like all the Austrian states. And if I go back to Germany, or the German provinces, Schweiz, Switzerland. Yeah, so that's basically how the AJAX for a chained dropdown works. And what I did there is I tried to minimize the overhead regarding the rendering we just had earlier with the double render. and put it into a component, into a view class, in this case tools.ajax. If you're interested in how it works, you can just check it out yourself. It basically makes this a little bit more dry, as I simply add the view class, and you can also do that automatically if you want to. It's shown on the blog post regarding my AJAX experiences. The link is in the end later, you can look it up. So we just add the view class, and itself, it renders the appropriate view and returns it as JSON automatically. So all that is done up here manually in like 10 lines, whatever, kind of reduced to a few only then. Yeah, so that's basically what you can do. You can try to make the JSON view a little bit more customized for your needs, and to reduce the amount of code necessary. You can just make it more dry. So that's country provinces example. And you can even do pagination AJAXified. And in this case, I tried something by not actually using a second view or a second controller or whatever. I tried to use the same controller and to minimize the changes required to make this AJAXified. I simply added a small script to the view, and it should AJAX load all the rest. Yeah. Bam. My screen is still small, but I think you can see it. So it's loading via AJAX. Last. Yes. But I didn't change really the controller or any of that code. I simply added a small snippet in the view class, which you can also check out later. So back to our slides. One tip that I ran into sometimes, when you're using AJAX, you don't want to make the browser cache it, as otherwise, in the early example where we calculated, and you said 2 plus 3 equals 5, if you try that again with 3 plus 7, that would still equals 5 maybe, if your browser caches it. So we shouldn't cache the AJAX requests if they change. And then you can that you can do in your before render callback in the app controller, for example. This disable cache, or in new 2.x versions, it's actually this request disable cache. So it's not controller specific anymore, but it's part of the. No, I think it's the response object, right? This response disable cache. Yeah. This one is deprecated as far as I know, and will be removed. So better use the response one. Yeah, so basically that's pretty much it. Any questions? All right. Here's a resource pretty quick. Of course, the book. That second link is the app regarding the first examples, get and post, we just looked earlier. And on the sandbox, there are also the AJAX examples, the jQuery examples with the autocomplete, which I failed to mention earlier, I think, and the blog post regarding AJAX and CakePHP with more detailed information. I can look at the autocomplete because Neon 1024, there he is, yeah. He made a pull request to add this autocomplete snippet with dogs, for example. Yeah, there's a dog. So you can see that it just by typing requests all the possibilities and displays a small little drop down. And this was like a few lines of code, right? Yeah. So basically, if it's done right, it's pretty much very convenient to add all kinds of AJAX snippets to your websites. Yes. Good. Thank you very much.